Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. The increasing cost of going back to school.
We're not buying a backpack for the older son. We're reusing the from last year.
What's hitting parents and teachers the hardest? Plus, a break in a cold case.
They analyzed and reviewed evidence, pored over investigative notes, and searched for new leads.
How Vancouver police found a suspect in 4 sex assaults 14 years later. And the rising price of gas pushing the cost of other things higher.
It affects it quite a bit.
How one Vancouver food truck is coping.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. As students across the province get set to go back to school after the weekend, the affordability crisis is front and center. With the price of everything from extracurriculars to school supplies going up, parents and teachers are feeling the crunch. Liam Britton is looking at the consequences.
Like pens, even those book notes.
Backpacks will be full, but mom and dad's wallets, not so much. Yong Yu just needs basics like pens and notebooks for her kids in university.
Simple stuff. Generally, everything with the price going up, right? But you need them. It's not something you can miss.
Natalia Stratulad is buying clothes and a backpack for her kids in elementary school.
The clothes, that's one thing that they run out quite fast. They grow and also they wear them, and shoes too. Yeah, for a good pair of shoes, the prices are quite high.
Inflation has grown many price tags this year.
Well, here's a math lesson parents won't welcome. Turns out many back-to-school expenses are up from last year, according to Stats Canada. Textbooks and supplies up almost 3%. Extracurricular activities like sports and music lessons, 5.5%. And as for stationery, that's up almost 13%. And for families who can't afford those increases, they're turning to charities.
The school supply is almost $100 for one kid.
In Delta and Surrey, the Guru Nanak Food Bank is holding a school supply drive.
A lot of pencils, erasers, sharpeners, sticky notes, calculators. People, coming here to the food bank for food, they are concerned about the supplies as their kids is almost ready to go back to the schools.
The YWCA says many single parents especially feel the pinch.
Transportation costs and housing costs just make everything else, and groceries make everything else really tough to come up with those extra funds that you really need this time of year.
Teachers are shelling out for supplies too.
We'll have colleagues who are stocking up their classroom with things that most people wouldn't think of, like food, because they are very aware that there will be students coming to the classroom who routinely don't have adequate food.
BC's Education Ministry says it's providing unprecedented help for families struggling with school costs. $214 million over 3 years for school food programs, and a supplement for families on assistance to help with extra expenses. But in the meantime, with living costs high, some parents will dread the ring of the cash register before the ring of the first bell. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A shortage of BC teachers is expected again this year, likely to put pressure on current staff.
There are some places where they are again concerned that they're not going to have an adequate staff to run their schools or their district properly. We know that's already happening. We know that there are more calls out, more hiring of uncertified individuals happening across the province. So it's going to be more of the same.
The BC Teachers Federation says staffing shortages will mean a decrease of services for students and families, including fewer education assistants and staff who are able to support learners with special needs. Well, gas prices are soaring ahead of the Labor Day weekend, with prices in BC topping $2 a litre. As Renee Filipponi reports, with those prices taking more and more out of paychecks, it's raising questions about what's to blame, market forces or a lack of regulation.
The price at most pumps in Vancouver is more than $2 a litre, and it could get worse.
I mean, they're already too high right now, so going any higher is just a bit ridiculous.
Prices normally spike heading into long weekends as Canadians hit the road.
When people drive, what happens? There's demand for gasoline. So when there's demand for gasoline, when the supply is restrictive, what happens to pricing? It goes up. What we expect.
This analyst says the supply is restricted because of refinery issues. A fire in Louisiana took a refinery offline earlier this week. And then there is Hurricane Idalia, which has led to the stockpiling of gas.
When you have hurricane season, refineries actually had to shut down for several weeks post-hurricane because they had damages.
It's basically companies doing
But not everyone is buying it.
The oil companies are gouging consumers. They got to fill up
Economist
that tank.
Mark Lee says Canadians are struggling to make ends meet, and the government needs to step in.
So there's no reason why you couldn't have a more regulated price system that allows companies to make reasonable profits on the investments that they've made, but that gets rid of this kind of gouging behavior.
Prices in Canada are higher than the U.S. due to various taxes, including the carbon tax. There are calls across the country for Ottawa to pause that tax to deal with high prices.
Birria grilled cheese for Asia.
Kelly McKenzie is selling sandwiches to the crowds at the Pacific National Exhibition. He runs 6 food trucks. Gas costs him nearly $1,200 a week right now.
We've had to raise our prices, which is hard because, we want to offer, a product that's good for families. Birria grilled cheese here.
Another example of how high gas prices can raise the cost of living far from the pumps. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Commuters in Richmond are being warned of upcoming disruptions on the Canada line. TransLink says service will end at 9:30 each evening from September 5th to December 19th. The impacted stations are between Bridgeport and Richmond Brighouse. A bus bridge will operate between those stops, and it's to facilitate the ongoing construction of the new Capstan station. Canada Line service to YVR Airport will not be affected. With the new highly mutated COVID variant now being detected here in BC, the question is, how concerned should we be? Our Eva Ugwen-Senj is looking at the warnings and what we need to know as we head into the fall.
The new COVID Omicron variant detected in the Fraser Health region, BA.2.86, has more than 30 mutations. The World Health Organization has named it a variant of interest, but BC's top doctor says it's not yet a cause for concern.
There's no indication that so far that it causes more severe disease.
But a rise in cases this fall is likely.
It will go up in terms of the number of cases in the fall. It's respiratory virus season. It's not unexpected.
Conway says while things are still relatively calm, British Columbians shouldn't let their guard down.
Last week in Canada, there were 30 deaths due to COVID.
And health officials say booster shots will be key to maintaining immunity.
85% of British Columbians probably have had COVID. It's created this hybrid immunity, and we just need to build on that with the new vaccine when it becomes available.
The province is planning for a full immunization campaign this fall, but is still waiting for details on when up-to-date vaccines will be available.
It's a matter of Health Canada approval, so they're happening, but we expect to bring forward information, sort of the plan for the fall. We've obviously already developed a plan for the fall for respiratory illness season in acute care, and you'll see that very soon.
Dix was speaking from the site of a brand new long-term care facility in South Vancouver this morning.
We're going to be taking steps, obviously, to protect people in long-term care in the fall, starting with vaccination. But the testing and our understanding of what's going on in long-term care, it's a daily issue now and will continue to be.
In the meantime, people with mild symptoms are encouraged to access rapid home tests, and the more accurate PCR tests will only be used for people with more severe illness. Eva Ugwen-Senj, CBC News, Vancouver.
It's a cold case spanning 14 years, but now a man has been charged in relation to 4 sexual assaults against young women in Vancouver's downtown core. As Yasmin Gandam tells us, the suspect was found in Saskatchewan and has been brought back to BC.
It was here on Christmas Eve in 2010 when a woman was allegedly assaulted while walking in the downtown core. The incident followed 3 other alleged assaults against women between the ages of 25 and 35. One on Canada Day in 2009 at Granville Island, the next in November of the same year in the West End, and then 7 months later, a third in Yaletown. More than a decade later, 45-year-old Arturo Garcia Gorjon has been charged with 4 counts of sexual assault. Police are hoping the arrest provides some much-needed answers to the victims and their families.
It's an intensely personal decision for any victim of a violent crime to come forward and share their story with police. We owe it to those who do so to do everything we can to support them, to identify the people responsible, and to hold those offenders accountable.
The arrest comes after Vancouver police launched Project Scrimmage with hopes of finding the suspect, obtaining evidence from the public. Wilson says the break in the case came in January when investigators linked the first 3 attacks to the Christmas Eve assault in the downtown core. Investigators then traveled to Saskatchewan to arrest Gorjon and bring him back to Vancouver to face charges. Now, a judge has released Gorjon on conditions, and he's currently living in Vancouver but does travel for work.
I don't know off the top of my head exactly what they are, but I can tell you that our investigators are well aware of those conditions. We do have a safety plan in place, and we're making sure that he abides by those conditions.
Gorjon will make an appearance in court, but that date has not been set yet. VPD say they do not believe there is any threat to the public at this time. Yasmin Gandham, CBC News, Vancouver.
A Kelowna RCMP officer won't serve jail time for an assault on a nursing student 3 years ago that was caught on camera. Constable Lacey Browning was sentenced this week in the case that got national media attention. Brady Strachan tells us what she was doing in court today.
It was surveillance video in January 2020 that brought this case to the RCMP's attention. That video was then viewed by millions of people around the world in media reports and on social media during a time of heightened attention to cases of police misconduct. The video shows Constable Lacey Browning attending to a wellness check on nursing student Mona Wang. In the video, Browning is seen dragging an unresponsive Wang out of her apartment suite, down a hallway, and into the lobby, where she later pulled on the unresponsive student's hair and stepped down on her head with her boot. In court this week, a judge called Browning's treatment of Wang criminal, saying it was highly inappropriate for a police officer responding to a person in a mental health crisis. The court heard Browning had been under considerable stress from her job and was struggling with compassion fatigue at the time. Browning pleaded guilty to 1 count of assault last year at the onset of her trial. The judge handed her a 2-year conditional discharge, meaning she will likely not serve jail time nor have a criminal record. As for her role in policing, the RCMP placed Browning on administrative duties as an internal code of conduct investigation is ongoing. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
This weekend, Joffre Lakes Park will be temporarily reopened. Access to the park has been limited as the Lil'wat Nation and the Nkwatqua First Nation are holding a harvest celebration on the land. But with the long weekend coming, the 2 First Nations have agreed to open the park for public use from Saturday to Monday. It will then be closed again on Tuesday until it reopens on National Truth and Reconciliation Day on September 30th. Darius Madavi joins us now with the first look at the weather, and not too much rain today, Darius, at least here in Metro Vancouver. But how long is this cold stretch expected to last?
Looks like we'll have a bit of a reprieve from the cold this weekend. Temperature's going to come up for Friday and Saturday, but we do still have to get through a day or 2 of cold, and then it's a return to it heading into next week. So you're right, we didn't see too much rain here in Vancouver in the last 24 hours. We did get a good amount in parts of the southern interior. It missed Kelowna for the most part, but just south of it and over in the southeast, we got a very good amount of rainfall over the next 24 hours. We'll take a look at what we're looking at later this hour, but temperatures staying low through most of the southern interior today, except in Fort St. John. Those coming down tomorrow as well for pretty much below seasonal temperatures across the province. Kamloops comes way down, a bit of a hint at what we're going to be looking at in terms of the rainfall tomorrow. And in Cranbrook, temperatures start to climb a bit after that massive drop that they had today. So looking pretty below seasonal across most of the province and seasonal here in Vancouver.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Canada has updated its travel advisory to the United States, warning LGBTQ people that new state laws and policies may affect them. Advocacy groups in BC are echoing that concern.
It really takes an extra effort and time, consume extra time to plan things out and to try. And if you need to go for any reason, whether it's for work or vacation or visiting family, that you need to take precautions and doing research.
The risk level for the U.S. is still green, listed as take normal security precautions, and the advice doesn't call out specific locations. But when asked for details, Global Affairs Canada referred to laws banning drag shows and restricting access to gender-affirming care for transgender people. And in more travel news, Canadian passport holders will soon be unable to obtain visas upon arrival in Egypt. Starting this Sunday, Canadians traveling to Egypt will have to apply for a visa through the Egyptian Embassy in Ontario or the Egyptian General Consulate in Montreal before they leave this country. As of October 1st, this will also apply to Canadians with proof of Egyptian citizenship who could previously enter the country without a visa. The Egyptian embassy says the rule change is a response to Canadian measures that deny visas to Egyptian citizens. More than 20 types of energy drinks have been included in a Canadian recall. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is concerned energy drinks such as Prime may not be safe because of the amount of caffeine in each drink. In a statement, Prime says its drink falls within the legal limit of the countries it's sold in, but the more caffeinated version has been found in cities like Quebec and in Toronto, resulting in the brand not complying with Canadian laws. Other brands such as Sonic the Hedgehog, Toxic Rick, and Bob Ross are included in the recall. Pediatricians are warning of the potential side effects for teens, such as anxiety, irritability, and panic attacks. And if you're looking for a different kind of beverage, you may want to try a peach Bellini, which, as we've learned today, is Toronto rapper Drake's drink of choice.
You got 30 minutes. 30 minutes to send 4 of them peach leans over to my hotel room right now. Them leanies, them Lena Marie's, them Lena Turners, peach Leanioski. It's my last show in Vancouver. Like, I need the juice up. Like my brother Train would say, like, I need the juice up.
Yeah, that's Drake talking there from his hotel room looking onto the Cactus Club in Cole Harbour. He posted that call out to Cactus Club on his Instagram this afternoon. And sure enough, within minutes, the drinks were hand-delivered to Drake's hotel room. We asked fans what other food and drink they would recommend.
Bubble tea. Sure, bubble tea. I would definitely say he should go try some Indian food, probably like Tasties or something. They do have a location in Vancouver as well, so that's something I would definitely recommend that he should go try out.
Korean fried chicken, honestly. Vancouver does it best. Haven't had it anywhere better, so I'd say you should probably check that out.
Yeah, these fans are all waiting outside his hotel trying to catch a glimpse of the star. Drake is performing at Rogers Arena tonight for a makeup show after his Monday show was canceled. Making sure everyone benefits from the housing market boom. That has one local economist proposing tax reform. We'll speak with him live coming up. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Athletes from across BC and beyond gathered in honor of the Canadian downhill racing legend. He grew up biking on Vancouver Island. Steve Smith died at the young age of 26 several years ago after an enduro motorcycle accident. Claire Palmer has more on how he's being remembered.
It's been 7 years since the passing of Steve Smith, who went by Stevie, a racing icon and inspiration to so many Canadian mountain bikers, both young and old.
Stevie Smith is a really iconic downhill racer, so it's super cool to be racing in his honor in this sick track.
I think it's really cool to have my first few races in the memorial of Stevie Smith, and I'm excited to race it.
In honor of Stevie, riders took on the challenging Monster Mile at Mount Washington, fueled by the legacy of their personal hero.
Stevie, he's my hero, and he definitely inspires other Canadian riders.
A portion of the proceeds from the 7th annual memorial race goes to the Stevie Smith Legacy Foundation, a charity dedicated to mentoring Canada's next generation of elite gravity athletes. The event is also a BC Cup event, a part of a series of races where athletes compete for the BC Cup.
Whether it's bikes or skateboards, it's just kids out there, outside, not inside gaming. And that's what kind of Steve wanted. You know, he wasn't a gaming kid. He was an outside kid. And that's what he wanted to instill in others if he could.
Stevie was born in Cassidy, a central Vancouver Island community near Nanaimo. Throughout his career, he showcased his talents at events all over the world and is considered one of the greatest Canadian racers. He was the first Canadian to win an overall downhill World Cup. He died in 2016 at the young age of 26 in an enduro motorcycle accident.
I think Stevie's legacy really carries through the hearts of all the mountain bike community and will continue for many years to come.
His mom says events like this and Nanaimo Steve Smith Bike Park help carry on his passion for growing the sport.
Some days it's very emotional because in all those kids I see Steve, and I want them to know that they can do it too. That's what they really want. And yeah, I just see a lot of little Steves out there, and it makes me happy.
Claire Palmer, CBC News, Mount Washington.
A new report from the left-leaning Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives says trillions of dollars in residential real estate is minimally taxed in BC. The organization is suggesting new taxes could produce billions in annual revenue while only affecting about 1 in 9 households. Author of the report and senior economist Alex Hemingway joins us live for more on this. Alex, first off, what sort of new taxes are you suggesting?
Yeah, so we actually outline a menu of provincial level property tax policy options that would focus as narrowly as the top 1.9% of the most expensive properties in the province to as broad as the top 12% of BC households. And, you know, part of the context here is that we've seen an increase in property wealth in the province just in the past 20 years of $1.7 trillion. So it's contributing in a massive way to wealth inequality in BC today.
What about those homeowners, though, who are already stretched thin, especially, you know, those with variable mortgages who've seen their costs significantly rise?
Yeah, so it's important when we think about the case of very property wealthy but cash flow challenged households that an option built in here is to defer those additional property tax payments until the sale of the house. You know, if you're in a situation where you've accrued $1 million, $2 million, $3 million of housing wealth, you wouldn't actually have to pay any additional tax until you cash out under a number of the options here. Many of them focus on that threshold of $3 million. They would only apply on value above that.
Okay, but if people bought recently and their property value has not gone up by $3 million in the time they've bought, that's still, you know, potentially leaving them pretty stretched because deferring property taxes in that case may not be an option. What then?
Yeah, you know, if we are successful in addressing the housing crisis and can actually stop property values from rising, stop rents from rising, we need a whole range of other policies to do that are absolutely crucial. Then you might create that situation, and that would be a big success if we could stop the rise of housing prices. In those cases, I think we would need to look at special cases of folks who have just bought in. But even if you bought in a few years ago, we've seen a massive run up in prices since then. So there's already significant land value gains baked in.
How would your suggestions alleviate financial pressures on others who don't own land at this point?
Yeah, so that's one of the challenging situations we're in this province. There is genuinely conflicting interests between those who are renting and on the outside of the market. We need more investment in non-market housing to address that issue from the public sector. We also need to address issues at the municipal level, like exclusionary zoning that bans apartments on most of our city's land. Property tax can play a role here by addressing some of that baked-in inequality that we've already seen, that $1.7 trillion increase in wealth. I think we have to ask ourselves as a province whether we want to address that inequality. I think many property owners are interested in addressing that as well, and sort of recognize that in many cases, what they've got in the form of land value gains is kind of like winning the lottery, and that we've got to do something about that as a province. One of the other options we put forward in the report is to convene a citizens' assembly on property and land tax reform, so people from all walks of life can put their heads together and weigh these trade-offs and how we're going to address these issues.
Alex Hemingway is a senior economist and public finance policy analyst with the left-leaning Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, for some who aren't able to get on the property ladder here in BC, seems like they are turning to Alberta, and that's having a big impact on housing prices in Edmonton. As Nama Weingarten reports, out of the province, investors are attracted by lower prices and rental incentives.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So this home offers a modern open concept design.
More and more people outside of Alberta are investing in Edmonton real estate. People from places like Toronto or Vancouver. So how much would a house like this be in, say, Toronto?
You're well over $2 million.
And how much is
Easily.
it here?
$770,000.
Calvin Hexter works with real estate buyers and investors in the city. But lately, he's been seeing more and more clients out of province. Skyrocketing housing prices in Ontario and BC are making people realize their dream home might be one they'll rent out to somebody else. And a cheaper price tag is just one factor.
There's no PST, there's no land transfer tax. If you are looking at purchasing a property for the intent of investment and you're going to rent it out, there's a lot more favorable landlord rules versus tenant rules.
In Ontario, it could take more than 6 months to evict someone who isn't paying rent. But in Alberta, you could do it with a 2-week notice. There's also no rent control, and even building properties from scratch is easier out here.
It's so hard to build there. The timelines are crazy, and it's so expensive.
But with more out-of-province buyers, there's speculation over how it could influence the local market. Prices are already going up in Edmonton, but how much investors have to do with it is still up to debate.
The headlines that we're reading and all the conversations that we're having, saying those darn investors are, pushing everybody out. There's some argument for that in certain cities, but that isn't the norm. And it is not the case by any stretch with what's happening in Edmonton.
It increases the supply of rental housing, and there's always going to be a need, right? It's people who can't afford to buy or can't, don't have the credit or just don't want to.
But whether or not prices are directly affected, the competition is.
Out-of-province investors or buyers are a lot more skilled at writing good offers than local Edmontonians. They're used to a seller's market. They're used to a market that is so hyper-competitive, and then they come here, we don't see the same level of competition. If you're in a bidding war towards an out-of-province client versus a local, out-of-province might end up winning.
But this trend doesn't have to mean out-of-province folks are taking over. These investments could translate into migration. People in the real estate industry I spoke to mentioned that a lot of their investors, especially young ones, eventually move out here to enjoy the lower cost of living and actually live in the house that they buy. Nama Weingarten, CBC News, Edmonton.
The storm leaving thousands without power. Hurricane Idalia sweeps through multiple U.S. states. We'll have the latest on what the days ahead are looking like after the break.
I'm here at Simon Fraser University to do a story on computers. I wonder if my boss made the right decision to send me, whether or not he used the right process.
The university has one that helps management make decisions about hiring, firing, and who should make coffee in the morning.
Does the problem have a quality requirement such that one solution is likely to be more rational than another? Yes, no, or help? Yes.
This one is called a decision support system. It can even be used in the television news business. The story assignment editor wants to know if it's worthwhile to do an item on, say, computers. He plugs in and is ready for action.
I must have done something wrong. Is acceptance of the decision by subordinates critical to the story? Certainly should be.
The computer lists a series of predetermined questions. The operator answers yes or no. The result is a printout from the machine that indicates whether or not to cover the story and how it should be done. If he's wrong, he can always blame the computer.
Spelled my name wrong. Not gonna do it again.
Embarrassing, eh?
Certainly is.
The next thing could be a machine that does the reporter's job.
And now we're looking at the final recommendations the computer makes, and now all I have to do is go ahead and follow its suggestions or make a decision on my own. Okay.
Writes, edits, and narrates. And never makes a mistake. And never makes a mistake.
No, you're putting in your name. You're on the first question.
Oh!
And never makes a mistake. And never makes a mistake. As long as you kick it once in a while.
The RCMP is warning residents of the Northwest Territories not to try to return to the communities they left because of wildfires. They say they've heard reports some people are planning to drive back from Alberta and not stop for the checkpoints. The Premier of Northwest Territories visited an evacuation center in Edmonton and had this message for people who want to get home.
As soon as it's safe to go home, as soon as the fire's in control, then it will take about 4 or 5 days at least. We need to make sure that the power, the sewer, the airports, the hospitals, all that infrastructure, grocery stores, gas stations are functioning first, and then we'll bring people home.
Nearly 70% of the territory's population of around 45,000 has sought refuge in Alberta and beyond. The province has extended its state of emergency until September 11th. In Montreal, a statue of Sir John A. Macdonald will not be put back. Protesters brought it crashing to the ground 3 years ago. Marina von Stackelberg looks at how the city is dealing with the legacy of Canada's first Prime Minister.
A statue of John A. Macdonald toppled by protesters in a Montreal park. After 3 years of consultations, the city has decided the sculpture of Canada's first Prime Minister will not be placed back on its pedestal.
For some people, it would have been the right thing to do to put it back. Some people would have wanted to, that would break it down.
The statue will be restored and displayed somewhere else. In its place, Montreal will commission new artwork and a plaque to acknowledge the controversy.
This is really a sensitive matter. Some people are scared that it might be erased, but for us, what we think is that Macdonald will still remain with or without a statue.
Notre gouvernement, elle est très claire. Il ne faut pas réécrire l'histoire. Il faut.
Quebec's Minister of Culture says Montreal's decision rewrites history, but others say it corrects it.
I believe that the statue being placed up without any context for so long has erased so much of our history, of our communities, and the damages he's done.
John A. Macdonald was behind many of Canada's racist policies toward Indigenous people, including the residential school system. Statues of him have been targeted across the country, some vandalized, others completely torn down. In several cases, municipalities decided to remove them proactively, but many jurisdictions are still deciding what to do with the statues and the sites.
Removing a statue of one man who's long dead and putting a few plaques and artwork, it's a nice gesture. We have to look at how and why and on what curriculum resources we have in our schools.
Canada has plenty of streets, parks, and buildings named after the first Prime Minister. Many of those are up for a name change too, like this parkway. It has the new name Kichizibi Mikon, Algonquin for Great River Road. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, the end may be near for 24 Sussex Drive after decades of neglect and runaway repair costs. CBC News has learned that the federal agencies in charge of the Prime Minister's official residence are exploring new sites for a new build, something larger, safer, and more accessible. But the stone mansion wasn't always rat-infested and run down. Our Ian Hannamansing takes us into the CBC News archives for a look at what the house once was.
The threshold of 59, we go calling and reach the threshold of this house. The address is 24 Sussex Street, Ottawa. Perched primly on 5 meticulous acres, 70 feet above the broad waters of the Ottawa.
24 Sussex has been home to Canada's Prime Minister since 1951, when Louis Saint Laurent reluctantly moved in under the condition he could still pay rent, a practice that continued until 1971.
Do you live here, Mr. Diefenbaker, rent-free?
Well, there's provision in the statute whereby a very considerable sum has to be paid each month for the use of the premises. So in reality, there is an actual rental.
Since then, virtually every Prime Minister has lived in the house, but it wasn't originally built with world leaders in mind.
24 Sussex was built 111 years ago by a lumber baron who enjoyed sitting in his living room watching the logs float by on the Rideau Canal.
It was remodeled from an old house that was here, and they kept the stone walls of the outside and redid the inside, and it might have been more practical to tear it all down and begin again.
Sound familiar? Throughout the years, the house welcomed the political elite and foreign dignitaries, from JFK to the Queen.
Do you find that it's a terrifying prospect, the entertaining of the great and the new? Well, it would terrify me, and I think most things. Actually, one of our first guests was the Queen, and they were such pleasant guests, and everything was so easy that since then nothing's been difficult.
And from government to government, many of its residents tried to leave their mark on the mansion, swapping decor and artwork to make the temporary accommodation feel more like home.
When I look around this living room and what you did with it, I can't help thinking about that $15,000 budget that Joe gave you. I could imagine.
Stingy. Well, he did that at Stornoway too, so we were used to it.
Always careful of the optics of spending too much money.
The National with Knowlton Nash.
Good evening. Opposition MPs are calling it an orgy of opulence and selfish indulgence.
It's not the first time that Prime Minister Mulroney has been under fire for allegedly extravagant spending at his official residence. In November '84, there were charges that taxpayers were paying for lavish renovations that included a hot tub at 24 Sussex Drive.
I can assure you that I have not charged to the taxpayers of Canada any such items. Where there were personal wishes, they were assumed by me. And any suggestion to the contrary is absolutely false.
And the problems didn't stop at the cost of renovation. In 1995, there was a major security breach.
44 minutes early Sunday morning, an armed man roamed the grounds of 24 Sussex Drive. He moved inside the house, up the stairs, to within steps of the Prime Minister and his wife. And it was then, according to police, he attempted murder.
Alain Chrétien was the one who confronted the intruder and raised the alarm.
And I think that I'm lucky that she was there.
Shocking, but also not the first time an uninvited guest made their way into the Prime Minister's house.
Pierre had a woman hanging out in his closet waiting for him when he came home from work. And she was just there. And this was just after Trudeau-mania in the 69. She was just a fan. She was ever hopeful, I guess.
By 2008, 24 Sussex was in rough shape and hadn't had any major renovations in 50 years.
On the 24 Sussex to-do list of Auditor General Sheila Fraser, fix the wiring. It's way too old. And the plumbing, and the heating, and the air conditioning. There's asbestos in the walls, and if there's a fire, there are no sprinklers.
Knowing all these things that are wrong with this, what in your lingo would you call this place?
I would say very grand, classic home in Ottawa's finest neighborhood.
It's a fixer-upper.
And in need of a little bit of repair.
Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. No one wants to miss out on streaming content, but the price tag to keep up is getting larger. The reasons this isn't likely to change after the break.
Holland College's wait list for student housing was at about 150 students last month. That's since dropped by about 35 students who have found somewhere to live. But the college president says housing continues to be the #1 issue on campus, and they are exploring ways to tackle that.
The college has 266 beds for students here on the Charlottetown campus. There are 2 residence buildings, and years ago, the college started buying up houses like these ones near campus. But none of that is enough this year.
We've been talking to homeowners and landlords in and around the college. We've created lists that we're putting on our websites and saying these are the people to call, these are the areas to look. But we are concerned.
The president says housing has become more of an issue since the pandemic. 7 years ago, when this building was built, there were questions about whether it was even needed.
Now it's clear that we were right in building that, and we probably should, if we're going to continue our growth in international students, build a 3rd residence. But we have to look at that and see if we can do that financially.
The student union says it agrees more residence spaces are needed. It would also like to see the college create a safe housing coordinator to help students navigate the challenging landscape.
So what we're hearing from students is a lot of frustration and disappointment, particularly students from off-island who are very career-minded, want to come to our community and make a difference and build their professional capacity. So it's devastating when people can't find what they need.
The union says it is also hearing stories from students who have had to accept housing that feels unsafe or unstable in order to be ready for the fall semester.
The shortage is maybe a little bit more severe in our urban areas, but it's very important that we don't see this as an urban issue on PEI. Our housing inventory is low from Tignish all the way down to Georgetown, so students are suffering with this issue regardless of the programs or campuses they choose.
The college says another option may be to cap the number of international students it admits. The president says as a publicly funded institution, its first priority is to students here on Prince Edward Island, and it does not want to promise spaces to those who may arrive and find themselves without anywhere to live. Nicola McLeod, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Idalia is continuing its push through the U.S. tonight, with millions of people still in its path and many more dealing with the stunning aftermath. Hurricane Idalia first made landfall in Florida as a Category 3. Since then, it has moved northeast, punishing Georgia and the Carolinas. Chris Reyes now on the destruction that's been left behind and the risk that still remains.
Rest in peace, faraway in.
Cedar Key is an island city off Florida's northwest coast, a bullseye for Hurricane Idalia's Category 3 landfall. Other parts of the state's Grand Bend region battered just as badly.
No! Oh. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay.
With winds peaking at 200 kilometers an hour, trees toppled, roofs ripped apart, and hundreds of thousands of residents left without power.
It's like hell down there. Wind was blowing this morning at about 80 miles an hour.
Roads and highways also flooded. At one point, a dangerous storm surge neared 5 meters. Emergency crews on boats forced to rescue dozens of people. And when the storm passed, the wreckage revealed. In Tallahassee, the state's capital, even the governor's mansion wasn't spared. The storm uprooting a 100-year-old oak tree.
We haven't had a storm take this path at this level since the 1890s to hit this part of Florida. So this is something that is a really big deal.
From President Joe Biden, a clear message on climate.
I don't think anybody can deny the impact of the climate crisis anymore. Just look around. Historic floods, historic floods. More intense droughts, extreme heat, significant wildfires have caused significant damage.
Idalia weakened a Category 1 on its way to Georgia, North and South Carolina, putting those states on high alert.
The key here is don't be out on the streets if you don't have to be out on the streets. Stay home, sit down somewhere, and just ride this thing out.
Pretty scary stuff. Darius Madavi joins us now to look a little bit more about this, because Darius, you've been following Hurricane Idalia closely. What's the latest?
Well, we've seen the storm pass just over the Georgia-South Carolina border just now on satellite, and you can see on radar just how much rain a lot of these places are seeing. I think we have some footage from South Carolina or just in this last hour, and we can take a look at that to see just what the impact has been on the ground, how severe the storm has been, because as it's passed through, it has been really something else. Or maybe we don't have the footage, and that's fine too. Oh, here we go. And it's been really something else. We've seen winds consistently over 100 kilometers per hour, even now that it's been downgraded to a tropical storm. Rainfall in some places as high as 300 to 400 millimeters of rain by the end of this week in places like Tallahassee. And the storm isn't done yet, even though it's going to move out of the area by probably tomorrow afternoon. We're going to see, by tomorrow afternoon, we're going to see still the impacts until tomorrow evening, just as the storm continues to push high winds and rainfall into the area. So places here, you can see, I'm covering legend a bit, but 100 millimeters in some of these places. In the central parts, probably much, much more. We've already seen, as I said, incredible rainfall. And in large part, this is due to the high ocean temperatures that are just off the coast of Florida, anywhere from 3 to 5 degrees Celsius above what they usually are. That drives really rapid intensification. This hurricane went from a tropical storm to a Category 4 hurricane in under 24 hours, in large part because of these high ocean temperatures. And up here in Canada, if we see a storm make its way up to the Maritimes, we'll see something similar, because the ocean temperatures now are around where they were or higher than when we saw them last year with Fiona. So a very precarious situation we're in. We talked yesterday about how the supermoon is also driving some high tide, very high tides that could make the storm surge even more dangerous. We might see that still tonight because of the storm surges still being driven in Georgia. But here it'll just be a much brighter moon than usual because it is in perigee. It's even closer than this, actually. It's around 30,000 kilometers closer than it usually is during the moon's orbit. So a very spectacular full moon tonight if you can get out, but it might be a bit cloudy. So tomorrow night will also be good to go see that full moon, and it should clear up a little bit for tomorrow night. So some good news. Also good news, some rain around Kamloops, around the Shuswap area. A bit expected tomorrow in Kelowna, but a lot less. So mainly we're looking here for our main stretch of rain. Probably some showers overnight in Vancouver as well, but nothing too much. In terms of smoke, still a good amount in the southern interior and up north. Clearing out, still clear relatively in the south coast, but going to be seeing some more smoke as that gets pushed because of just some outflow winds over the next few days into Friday and Saturday. And then plenty of rain in the southern interior tomorrow, as we saw, a bit drier up north. And in Vancouver, we have a fairly Vancouver forecast with a bit of rain coming again at the end of next week, but pretty warm and dry Friday and Saturday.
Not too bad. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Let's go back now to one of our top stories tonight and the cost increase for people heading back to school this year. Joining me now for a bit more on how parents and students can save is Harshdeep Nijjar. He's on TikTok as the Money Debunker, where he posts tips on saving money in your day-to-day life. Also knows back to school shopping, just graduated from high school and started his business studies at SFU. Harshdeep, do you think there are different priorities between parents buying things and their kids and, kids themselves when it comes to back to school shopping?
Yep, totally. So with me being a student, I always prioritized getting the higher end items, say, like backpacks that were over the $100 limit, your special stationaries and stuff like that. But see, the thing is that now that I'm shopping for my own school supplies, there's a huge jump in what I thought prices would be. Pencils are going for $15, $20, the ones I was typically buying. Backpacks are up in the $100 ranges. So there's a pretty big price gap from what I thought school supplies would be to what actually it is.
Okay, so you're now shopping for yourself, but how do kids and parents sort of come to an agreement if it's the parents paying for everything?
So I know with electronics themselves, Canada's top retailers offer refurbished items. So, since schools are moving to more of the digital side of learning, Apple, Best Buy, Walmart, they all offer refurbished options. These usually are much cheaper and they have good warranties on them as well.
So your family actually bought hundreds of notebooks and pencils and pens and all of that years ago.
That's correct. My mom, she likes to do something called price matching, where basically she'll find a cheap price online for a Canadian retailer, and then we'll go to our local Walmart, Staples, anywhere that offers price matching, and we'll get them in bulk.
Wow, great tips. All right, Harshdeep Nijjar, the Money Debunker, joining us live today. Thank you. Well, it's getting more expensive to stream your favorite TV shows. Anis Haidari explains why the days of cheap one-stop streaming shops are gone and likely won't be coming back.
Or an incredibly powerful force field.
Dyer Shear Peters has to pay a little more these days after his favorite show switched streaming networks.
It's all these extra purchases and such. It's becoming very annoying. Basically, I hit my breaking point when it increases by $10.
His bills are now around $100 a month for more than half a dozen subscriptions. Paramount Plus is just one of the new services.
Of course.
Netflix now charges extra if you share passwords, and Disney Plus and Spotify are both increasing prices.
When these services launched, they were launched at loss leader prices, prices that weren't sustainable, that the companies knew weren't sustainable.
Now industry watchers say the days of low streaming bills are gone.
Wall Street basically said to Netflix, so we want to see profitability. Right? Subscriber growth is no longer going to be the bellwether of success for your company. We need to see profit coming from services such as this.
Broadcast and cable TV is becoming less and less profitable. Companies are trying to replace that revenue, so Canadian streaming bills could start resembling older, higher cable bills, say experts.
The overall Zeller's approach of the lowest prices, the law as far as streamers go, that's not coming back.
Which means Star Trek streamers have an ever-increasing bill.
I don't want to pay for any much more than what I have to.
But Canadians will have to boldly pay higher prices. to keep streaming.
Shut off that damn noise!
Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
After the break, it's not very often you wake up in the morning to find a sight this adorable. Bears taking over a backyard next.
I think as a first-time parent, all the fears come to you. Being with no family around, it felt double. It felt more, like strongly. So we definitely wanted them both here.
So important because is my only daughter. She was pregnant, and we want to be with her because they were alone. And here in Canada,
there was a federal program that was in their websites and everywhere, a program about reuniting families through the COVID situation. And we went through all of that.
All the papers they asked to bring, we have and show at the airport. But when we arrived to Fredericton, they say, New Brunswick, it's closed and there is no way you can stay here.
I said to my mom, show him everything you printed out. Like I was like, go back to the binder, page 3 to page 6, like everything. And she said, no, they're just not interested in seeing that. They just said the rules in New Brunswick are not allowing any visitor to come.
We are healthy people. You can make us test if you want here in Canada. But he said, no, no way, no way, no way, no way.
I think we really didn't fight, because we got carried away with the emotions. Like this was me 3 times 3, that back then. So I couldn't even speak.
I'm happy for meet my grandson. That's very, very nice for me to hold him and my daughter also. Thank you.
I'm April Nason, and I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator at the Canadian Sea Turtle Network. I've had asthma since I was a kid, and so we were allergic to everything. We had pet goldfish as a kid that would die after a week because we would overfeed them. So after many rounds of funerals and tears, my parents brought home turtles thinking they were going to last about 6 months. 23 years later, they were still a major part of my life. And once you start paying attention to them, you realize their personalities and that they can be well socialized. And then all of the different individual quirks and personalities that they have. So many people, because they just assume that they're a turtle, don't really believe you that they can have these types of personalities. So then being able to educate people and tell turtle stories about all the kind of cool things that they can do. As somebody who loved just all animals, these were the one animals that I could actually spend time with and love and cuddle. And yes, turtles cuddle, and they love to do it. Wanted to be like every kid, a marine biologist. I also really liked healthcare. Made the decision in high school to pursue a career in healthcare. Chose dentistry on a whim because I have very small hands. And got into dental school and loved dental school, very much enjoyed dentistry. But a few years out, did definitely miss the call of kind of my first passion of kind of marine biology. Happily retired June 17th of last year as a dentist and started working full-time with sea turtles. And it's been an amazing ride since.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On September 16th, join CBC Vancouver at the 2nd annual Come Toward the Fire, a free outdoor festival celebrating Indigenous community, culture, and creativity. Visit cometowardthefire.com. And September is Literacy Month. Have fun and support the cause by joining CBC Vancouver's Dan Burrett at Dakota's Team Trivia Challenge on September 27th. For tickets, register at dakota.ca.
5 young black bears came up to a Prince George woman's backyard and managed to turn it into a personal playground. Wendy Chartrand woke up around 7 a.m. and came across this outside her window. Take a look.
I always look out my bedroom window because we live, the slough is behind us. So I always look out the window just to see if there's anything out there, and woke up to find 3 bears on my side lawn. And when I went back to look at the window, Again, there was 5 bears. It is really a once in a lifetime photo opportunity, right? And yes, there's been a lot of good compliments. We're on their territory, so we just need to be mindful. Like they say, get everything picked up. But I picked my apple tree. My garbage is in a shed. If it's food that can really stink, it gets put in a Ziploc bag and in the freezer till garbage day. So I'm trying to do my part to prevent that.
Not often you see 5. 1, maybe 2, 3, but 5 is pretty incredible. All right, from bears to bees, Burlington beekeepers found themselves in a sticky situation this morning when boxes containing 5 million bees fell off a truck. While honeybees are not usually a threat, police did warn residents to avoid the area and keep their windows closed. Beekeepers on the scene said that a few thousand bees were likely killed as a result of the spill and are now trying to locate the queen bee, who the rest of the wannabe escapees will follow. And the expression "paint the town red" takes on a special meaning today at Spain's annual tomato fight. Trucks loaded with overripe tomatoes drove through town in eastern Spain, firing the fruit into the crowds and fellow partygoers. The event started spontaneously amongst villagers in 1945. It was banned in the 1950s, but gained popularity in the 80s, and as you can see, it's still going strong. It's so popular, organizers have had to limit the capacity, and they've started to sell tickets. Yeah, one thing I'm noticing there is there's not a whole lot of women. It's a very male-dominated tomato event. Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. We will see you tomorrow. I'm on assignment, but Tanya Fletcher will be in the host chair. Good night.